Okay, we are recording now, and we are going to put this session live on Facebook just for this session. No worries. The Q&A is not going to be live. The Q&A is just going to be, where's this going? Thriving Blind. The Q&A is just going to be private with all of us in the room. So we're not even going to record that Q&A. Wait, we don't want it on Michael Smedley. We want it on Thriving Blind. Woo! Okay, let's see if we can get it to go live. Right, and we're live on Facebook. What's up, Thriving Blind community? We're here with the Thriving Blind at College. We're sending this out to you live here while Michael does the presentation, but we are going to shut it down for the Q&A. It will be sitting on Facebook for the hour after we are done recording and presenting, and then it's going to disappear, but we will give you information to get the recording if you would like to get that later. So we just did the big intro of Michael, a senior at Penn State here, and I'm going to turn it over to him so that everybody can get information from him. And I'm just going to switch to speaker view and put you on highlight or spotlight. Okay, if you can move to your left a little bit because the boxes of people are over there. Okay, cool. You're good to go.
Well, hi, everybody. Like my mom, Kristen, said, I'm Michael. I'm going to be a senior at Penn State, hoping and praying that we can get back into classrooms this year. It's looking good so far, and we got football tickets, so life is good. But it's been one heck of a journey to get here so far. Like she said, I also started out in Nashville at a really small private school called Belmont, and then decided that I wasn't really getting everything out of that school that I wanted. So then I transferred to the really big campus of Penn State with almost 46,000 students on that one campus alone. So I've kind of seen it all, which is in a weird way a great thing. Did not feel like it in the middle of switching schools in the middle of college. But I've gotten to walk both campuses and deal with disability departments and offices and administration at public, private universities and massive and little schools. So there are a bunch of things that change with the school that you go to, and that's pretty much anywhere in the country. And that's why every school has a specific disabilities office that it's super important that you sit down with them as early as you can to figure out what their accommodations are. But there are some things that stayed the same for me from high school to college and from one university to another. And that is the backbone of technology and O&M skills that I use to get from my apartment or my dorm to class and to social events and to football games every weekend. The biggest driving forces behind my day and my success at school are my iPhone and my MacBook. Oddly enough, I was a JAWS user all through my primary, middle, and high schools. We were a Windows school district, and then when I went to college, because I'm in entertainment and that's the industry standard, I decided that it wasn't going to be the best option if I just stuck with what I knew, which was JAWS on Windows. So I put in a lot of work in the last couple of years of high school on my own to learn Mac OS and to learn VoiceOver so that I could jump in on day one of freshman year using the same system and all the same programs as my sighted peers. And that was huge because when I go into recording studios now, I'm using Pro Tools, which is the industry standard, and not the software that I was using on Windows, which is not sold anymore. So that's those two devices, my phone and my MacBook, are what I use every day to do things like email, take notes in class. I use my phone to get directions to buildings that I haven't been to before, or if I'm going somewhere completely new, I can jump on this thing called Ira, which is like a one-way FaceTime call that connects you with an agent who can see your location, your camera feed, and can also even see your Uber and Lyft account to request you rides, all of the crazy things that we do on massive campuses to get around in the rain. So the iPhone, the MacBook, I recently actually just started using an iPad to read my textbooks and have notes up on a separate window in my laptop. so that I'm not constantly jumping back and forth between things. I have a talking TI-84, which was a struggle to get because it has a massive price tag. For those of you who aren't familiar, the regular TI-84 from Texas Instruments is about $100. And to get the version of it that talks is an additional $500. And when I approached the disabilities office at Belmont, they told me they wouldn't supplement it and that it was a personal device. So I had to foot the bill for the whole thing. So that was a struggle. And then luckily I was able to reach out to, we have OVR, the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation in PA, and they were able to help me out. But that was, as we talk about, a massive barrier to access, that I was going to have to pay 6 times what everybody else was paying to have a graphing calculator for my math classes at school. And initially, the compromise from the state and Belmont was that they were going to get me a different talking graphing calculator that was way cheaper. But that's not what everybody else uses. And professors in regular classrooms have absolutely no idea how these weird, not named brand, off the shelf talking graphing calculators work. There's a reason that there's a talking TI-84, and that's because that is the industry standard, what everybody else is using. So if I had a problem with trying to figure out how to do something, the professor could use the talking TI-84 just like the calculators that everybody else was using, and it kept me on the same page and following the same steps as everybody else in class. So that was a huge deal there. I also I have a Braille Note Apex that I used all the time in high school that I actually rarely use anymore in college. The main time that I use it is if I have to give a presentation, I will wear it around my shoulder for the equivalent of my note cards, because I don't do those in hard copy Braille. But I stopped using the Braille Note a ton once I got to college because everybody else is using laptops. And the easiest thing for me to do to be on the same playing field and in the same situation as everybody else was to get on the laptop and do things the same way as them instead of being on the Braille Note, which is, again, something that professors have no idea what it is or how to help. I'm trying to think what I'm forgetting. The other thing that I have that's been a huge help is bone conducting headphones. And for those of you who aren't familiar, they don't go in your ear like traditional earbuds. They actually sit, you wear them like a backwards headband almost. They wrap around the back of your head and hook over your ear, and they sit right on the bone in front of your ear. And they actually pump sound in that way because somehow we can hear through that bone. I'm not a scientist. I have no idea how that works. But that's really nice because I will put voiceover through that on my laptop while I'm sitting in a lecture hall taking notes, so that both of my ears are actually still open and listening to the professor lecture. Or if I need directions while I'm walking on campus, I can put my navigation voice through those and have both ears open to cross streets safely and pay attention to my surroundings. Is there anything else that I'm missing?
Did you talk about how to get to know campus? When you get to campus, how do you know where you're going?
Yes, thank you. So one part of getting around is absolutely technology and GPS and all that flashy stuff. But in order for those to be their most effective, you have to have a super strong foundation in O&M and orientation and knowing how to get around as a person with a visual impairment, whether that be with a white cane or with a guide dog. And one of the biggest parts of that is scheduling in advance O&M lessons, orientation and mobility lessons, to your college campus, to your dorm, to get to your classes, where the cafeteria is, all of those things that when the sighted students check in, they just get a map and they can follow signs to get around. We don't really have that luxury. So I moved into both schools that I went to. I moved in a week early and did O&M lessons with certified O&M mobility instructors, and went around the campus and drilled my schedule on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, my schedule on Tuesday, Thursday, how to get, if my one class got canceled, if the next class was in a weird spot, how to get from my dorm to that class that's in a weird spot, how to get from my dorm to the cafeteria, to the student center where all the like restaurants, Burger King, Chick-fil-A, all those are, to the football stadium, anywhere that you could possibly want to go on campus that are the big places. Obviously, they're going to be little ones that pop up every now and then, but getting a big overview of campus, even, for me, there are buildings that are icons at Penn State that I don't have classes in, but I learned how to get there so that if I needed to go to some obscure building and somebody goes, oh, it's between the library and West dining halls on the library side of the street, I can get myself 90% of the way there because I know the landmarks of campus. And then I can either use my phone or Ira or ask somebody on the street for the last 10% where the front door to that new building is. So all of that to say, make sure that you have a game plan in place to get orientation to your college and to the surrounding community, especially Penn State borders up to downtown State College, which is where we spend a lot of time. So the big thing when you talk to O&M people is they're obviously going to want to get you oriented to your class schedule. But my biggest piece of advice is make sure you also speak up and advocate for yourself to find places that you're going to want to go socially.
Very good. Along those lines, a question came in from one of our mentor families, the Owens that run Navigating Blindness. They're actually on their way to campus right now to move Kai in. So they couldn't chime in. Their big questions are around social. How did you make friends when you couldn't recognize anyone when you first got to campus? And then also, how do you get included or even express you want to be included in events that there's on the bulletin board, the notifications? How do you know about them?
That's a really good question. So my first piece of advice is roommates. And I know not everybody has fantastic roommates, and that's part of life. But I was very fortunate that my freshman year roommate and I were best friends. We actually met on Facebook and talked for a couple of weeks, and then requested each other as roommates. And even through me transferring, we've stayed good friends. And I just flew down to Nashville to surprise him for his birthday. But if you are in a spot where you have roommates or even just other people, neighbors on your floor or in your building that you get along with and that you're really good friends with, definitely make sure you grab their phone numbers. If you don't have a Snapchat, I hate Snapchat, but I have it because that's just what a lot of people use to communicate. And if you get that, VoiceOver won't read the text on images, but you can at least chat like text messaging, even though they all want to do it over Snapchat. You can text people through it that way. So I would definitely make sure you have a Snapchat. But find people on your floor, in your building that you get along with and that you're friends with, and just text them, hey, what are you up to today? I'm going over to the caf to grab a burger. Do you want to come? Stuff like that. If you are in a spot where you don't have great people living on your floor, and even if you are, also get in and make friends with the people who sit around you in classes, because odds are, especially in classes for your major, like if you have to take a 100 level survey class for your major, their interests are pretty similar because you're in the same major. So definitely try and make friends with them. Even people in gen eds, you have that in common, that you both chose to take that gen ed, and that might expose you to a whole new friend group that's in a totally different major. I know one of my best friends is a supply chain major, and I know absolutely nothing about supply chain. But I've gotten to meet some of her friends, and they're pretty cool. And then about the bulletin boards, I was really lucky that both schools send out newsletters for people living on campus. But my RA and the RD, who is kind of like the advisor to all of the RAs, the three of us were talking, and they were like, oh, would it just be easier if we sent you an email every time? Like if we put up flyers, maybe once a week, if we just shoot you an email with the things that are on the flyers and the dates, and grab your RA or text your RA if you have any questions about it. So that was really nice. RAs and resident coordinators or directors, whatever your school may call them, are really there to help. They're not just there to bust people or to give you a hard time, but they really are there to help people, everybody, adapt to college life.
Awesome. Okay. You answered a few of the ones that came in advance from somebody going to Texas, Austin. But one of the questions I don't know that you handled yet was the food situation on campus, he says. More information on how to effectively navigate through the cafeteria, carrying food and drinks when you have a cane. What are some tips how do you manage all that?
So, yeah. So Belmont had one cafeteria, and then some other like to-go dining options, like a Chick-fil-A, a Chinese place. Penn State has 5 cafeterias, and each cafeteria is split into 2 different parts. So there's really like 10 different cafeterias on that campus. If it's University of Texas, I'm guessing that it's probably more close to Penn State style. So my advice would be on your O&M lecture, on your O&M lessons, talk to them about the cafeteria and find the one that's closest to either your dorm or where you have the most classes, where you think you're going to be eating the most, and get an orientation to that, where the different stations are and all of that, so that you at least know, if you're there without anybody, where in the general vicinity everything is inside there. The other thing that I did was, when I was on my orientation before school opened and it was empty, I got to just introduce myself to the administrators who actually run the cafeterias, and they knew me, they know who I was. So if I was running in between classes and it was just me and didn't have anybody with me, most of them are always around, and they would pop over and be like, hey, do you need anything? Can I help you grab this or that, the other thing? Belmont was also very similar. If I grabbed the cashier that was swiping people in and just said, hey, excuse me, I'm on my own right now. I don't have any friends with me. Can you just grab me somebody to go through the line with me? They would step away for a second and grab someone from the office that I would just go through with, and they would read what the specials were that day and all that, and then they would actually handle the tray so that I could grab onto them to weave through the chairs and all that.
Awesome. I think that before we open for Q&A, I'm going to turn the camera to both of us now. I think that what we should address very quickly, because it's in one of these questions, about the fact that many of you are sitting in states or countries where mobility instructors have not been back to work yet with you physically because of COVID things. This is a little outside of the norm, obviously, of if people are watching this session later and all of the world is back to normal. I will say this: when Michael got to Penn State, Pennsylvania shut down the mobility instructors and they never came out.
No, that was the second year.
Or the second year of Penn State. I'm sorry. He had already been there, 1 year. And then, so he did know the campus a little bit, but he was going off campus into an apartment. So moms, dads, grandmas, grandpas, aunts, and uncles, some of you have to pitch in and spend some time on campus and do it yourself, to be perfectly blunt. However, I could not stay long. I didn't know that they weren't coming. That was a whole new, anyway, we didn't know they weren't coming. So I was actually home after I dropped Michael off and then had to go back up. In the meantime, I will give you a couple of suggestions. Then if you are a mobility instructor watching this, do not send me a million messages. This is what we did in a pinch, in an emergency, when we needed help and nobody was coming. Delta Gamma sorority is on many, many campuses, and their philanthropy is service for sight. They have a lot more awareness, training, education around the blind and visually impaired community, because that is their number one community that they support. I would reach out to the Delta Gamma sorority president, who is in the top leadership position, of course, and let them know that you could use some help navigating, understanding the routes to getting to know the campus. Are they certified in orientation mobility? No. But they are a very good substitute in a pinch if you're still fighting with your state or country to get mobility services. Another thing that worked for us was a religious group that was on Penn State's campus. This group lives to serve. That's their number one mission, and to be helpful. And I think it turned out that the one volunteer that helped actually had lived at your apartment complex, right? So she knew all the routes and the bus routes and stuff like that, like the back of her hand, and could help Michael get to know those routes. So sometimes you do have to get creative when your agency isn't putting things in place for you. And you can absolutely reach out to me at thrivingblind@gmail.com to help you brainstorm some other folks that can step in. And like I said, we're hoping that this is the last semester that's going to be an issue, that people aren't, coming into the roles that they're supposed to have. Anything else on who had to fill in and stuff on mobility, getting to know the campus?
If you're going out of state to school, make sure you start that process and make sure you don't stop until they assign you an O&M instructor and give you their phone number or email address. Because when I went to Nashville, I called the office in Pennsylvania because that's where I live and that's who my case was being handled by. And they went, oh, well, you're going to school in Tennessee, so it has to go through them. So I called the office in Tennessee and they went, well, you're not a Tennessee resident, so your case handler in Pennsylvania has to reach out to us, and then we can assign you somebody here in Tennessee. So that happened. And then, so that was all good and well. And I thought that everything was taken care of. And then they were like, oh, well, there's a billing issue because even though you're going to school in Tennessee, you're a PA resident and the Pennsylvania office is the one requesting the O&M instructor. And she's certified to work in Tennessee, but she's not on the Pennsylvania payroll. So she needs to get hired in that state. And it was a mess. So you ended up doing orientation to Belmont.
Yeah.
And luckily that campus was small. It was 75 acres and it was pretty small. So we were able to get a good jump on it. And the O&M instructor was fantastic and understood all the craziness that was going on and said, screw it, you need O&M now and not when they figure out the payroll issue. I will make sure I get paid. So she jumped in and was a huge help. But make sure if you're going out of state or even to a private school, just make sure you stay a little bit more on them than if you're going to an in-state public school.
Yeah, and for all the folks that are tuning in that you're still in high school and or even earlier, congratulations to you for not procrastinating. But start thinking about these things well in advance, especially if you don't know what school, if you're choosing between several. I mean, our Mitchell, my younger blind son that's going off to Kutztown University of Pennsylvania in a couple of weeks, he had about 5 different schools he was thinking about, and we had to start looking at what are services like. Unfortunately, that's just it's a piece of the puzzle. What were services like? What kinds of things that state require? And that it helped to narrow the search. And when you do it like that, even though it might not seem like that's the best reason to be looking at a school, it's real. It's your real life, and you end up landing where you should land. Or you get bored where you landed and then you land somewhere else in year 2. But anyway.
I will say one more thing on that subject. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Textbooks. It's an interesting spot because I've been in both situations where I bought a textbook well in advance because the disabilities office says get it as soon as you can so that we can get working on it. And it was a $250 audio textbook. And I walked in on day 1. The professor said, you don't need it. And it was non-refundable. And I've also been in the other boat where, I bought that one ahead of time too. And I was the disabilities office at Belmont called me and they're like, this is great. You're the first blind person to take Stat 2000. And I was like, okay. And it was a nightmare because they had not had that textbook ready before in Braille. And they caught up in college. You do about a chapter a day. So they were like, oh, chapters 1 and 2 are coming in tomorrow for a class that met 3 times a week. That meant we were going to be done with those books on Wednesday and I wasn't going to have one for Friday. After chapters like 1 through 4, they were so far behind on textbook production that I took the rest of that class without a textbook. So I would make sure also when you're talking to schools, ask them what their turnaround times are for textbooks. If they have any of the ones, once you get your roster and your major, start those conversations, see if they have those books already there, what their lead times are, and all those crazy things, and what their fallbacks are for if they fall behind, because it happens.
You mentioned audio textbooks and Braille. You use both modalities?
The only time that I've used hard copy textbooks in college are for STEM classes. In English classes, in history classes, in most gen eds, and in most classes for my major that don't require any math formulas or anything like that, audio is just way faster and easier because they can give you a PDF of the book that takes, the publishers all have them. The publishers are required to be able to supply a PDF of the book, and that'll happen super fast, whereas hard copy Braille, as I've witnessed firsthand, can take forever. But for math classes, I'm still old school. I prefer the Perkins and hard copy Braille for math and science classes.
Remind me to have you tell the Perkins story about being creative and getting resources. But I just wanted to point out that we are, if we're not the biggest advocates for Braille on this planet, I don't know who is. However, Michael made a key point. Audio, a lot of times, is faster. It's faster access. And you'll see in college, the workload, especially if something is wrong with you and you take 29 credits, is huge. So you do have to consider your timing on things and what is the fastest way to do stuff. When you produce work, Are you doing that are you typing that out, or are you doing auditorily talking into something?
No, I type everything because I found that dictating to a laptop or to a phone does not handle formatting well, especially when you're trying to type a paper with parenthetical citations and quotations and not get slapped for plagiarism. It's just easier to type it all yourself. But back to the Braille thing, I honestly, I would say for non-STEM classes, the best thing that you can do is get a PDF of the book, because at that point you have the choice that you can either listen to it with a screen reader, or you can get a refreshable Braille display and choose to read it that way if that's your preference. But I PDFs are the easiest and the fastest turnaround times. They can be opened on laptops, Braille notes, iPads, Polaris devices. They can be opened on anything. They're, as opposed to a BRF file that can only be opened on a Braille note or a Polaris or a hard copy Braille, which can't be opened anywhere else.
I want to honor the time and make sure that we leave time for Q&A, but I want you to tell the story of Nashville when you were waiting for the Perkins.
That never came. I don't even remember all of it, but I remember Belmont. This is frustrating. Belmont refused to buy a Perkins because that was considered a personal device, just like everyone else had to provide their own pencils. Okay. So through a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend, someone had a Perkins and dropped it off with me because he was like, I'm not using it right now. And I wasn't allowed to store it in classrooms because teachers, professors had carts that they would move between classrooms to lecture. So I had to carry it. It was my arm workout of the day. It was great, especially in the 30-degree temperatures that I didn't know Nashville got. This metal Perkins, it was the old school one, to my exams, back from my exams. I didn't even bother taking it to class because I didn't have a textbook. So I would just sit and take my own notes on my laptop during the lecture periods. But I would carry it to and from exams, and it would go ding, ding.
As you were carrying it.
Yep.
Ah, the good old heavy Perkins. Well, look at those muscles you got now. My point of making sure we told that story is there are times when you just have to reach out in the network, reach out to us, or post in the Thriving Blind community page. If you're in the academy, post in there. If something like that happens and you're trying to locate in Tennessee near Belmont, does anyone have a Perkins? And then the final thing that I want to point out to all of you, especially those of you that are headed to college soon or in the next couple of years, I want you I want it to land heavily and stick that Michael said every single time he was talking about situations that came up or being prepared for things in college, he did it. There was no, my mom called and made sure. My mom talked to disabilities. The only time that mom came in was for the mobility to make sure that I could get on the plane and go home and knew that he would be safe. So it is hugely important that you take the initiative and you are the one coordinating all this. Now, I understand a lot of you may not have done that before. So those of you that are younger and families that have younger kiddos that aren't heading off to college yet, have them manage their IEP meetings, be in the IEP meeting, understand what it takes to advocate. These are all incredible skills that they need to have in addition to Braille, cane, technology. It's equally, if not most important, to be able to advocate and take charge of their own education, because I know some of you want to go to college with them, but trust me, when they're gone, it's really fun. It's a little quieter around the house. And when they're calling you or not calling you because they're having so much fun, it is fantastic. Yes, we are there as guides on the side and go in and help when things go awry. I was messaging people to try to find a Perkins Brailer. Of course, we support you in every way possible, but you guys have to take the lead on your education. Okay, I'm going to stop my soapbox now about doing that. And I'm going to open this up if you would like to. Oh, wait, there was a question. What was the name of the app that can help you navigate?
Aira, AIRA. They have, you can do free 5-minute calls once a day with them, and a bunch of locations are called Aira Access. Starbucks is the most recent one that the company actually foots the bill, and anytime you're in a location that's Aira Access, it's free. They had a program, a college program a couple of years ago where students could apply to get free service. That has since gone away. I'm hoping it was only because of COVID, and I'm hoping someone steps back in to sponsor that. But if not, you can at least still get those free 5-minute calls and Aira Access.
Okay, I'm gonna switch the screen and I'm gonna goodbye, Facebook. Thank you for tuning in. I'm sorry, we're gonna have a Q&A session now with all the people in the Zoom room. So we're stopping the live stream and we're gonna stop the recording.